island of sanity in the ocean of insanity in which we all live now. So that is a real refuge for me. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's on the webinar this morning, the brand new folks who are just trying this out for the first time, and the folks who've been with us for many, many months now, gathering together every Friday at 10 o'clock for a 30-minute opportunity of pulling back from the busyness and the overthinking that so many of us get caught up in, and allowing there to be some contemplation, some reflection, some depth, we hope, and thinking through some of the challenges that we're all living through. And as I often say, what I love about Friday Reflections so much is this opportunity to apply so many of the great principles and practices that many of us have been reading about and studying our whole lives from the world's wisdom traditions, whether it's Hasidic Judaism or the Sufi poetry of the Muslim mystics or Christian mystics or the philosophy of, insert the right name here. And lately we've been thinking about social justice a lot and, what we used to call politics, but really a better word for it is just, life. The way we organize our society, the way we distribute goods and services, the way we administer justice, that whole big ball of wax called the world. And I come from, of course, the background of academic philosophy, and so, I have my own biases and ways of looking in things and the way I was trained, and that gives me a certain point of view, just as you all on your life journeys have been molded and shaped by your teachings and teachers and by the things that you've spent your life doing. They gave you a pair of eyes and a pair of ears with which to see and hear the world. So we all catch a glimpse of a slightly different facet of the world. And coming together in community like this is a chance to sort of check our point of view against the point of view of others. And to me, it's always an exciting and bracing project. So thanks for being here. We do this every Friday. I'm thinking about the pandemic today. I thought it might be a good time here in early August. It might be a good time to return to a pretty constant theme in the early versions of this Friday Reflections. Do you know that we've been doing this for that we've been in pandemic shutdown? We're now into our 5th month. I said that to myself out loud today. I went, no, that can't be right. It's been about 3 months. No, we're into our 5th month. I think we started around the middle of March. That's when I certainly got kicked off campus as a professor at Southwestern College. School was shut down. We were all sent home. We all started using these machines to do education, to do business, to meet with our worship centers. Every facet of life possible has gone to this digital format. And here in early August, we've been at it for over 4 months now. And it struck me, part of me is getting used to parts of it. And wearing a mask doesn't really bother me anymore. I can't remember if I have it on or not. I always have one in my pocket because you never know, if a delivery guy's going to come to the door, and I pop it on. I'm one of those guys, I don't leave the house without wearing a mask, I don't literally wear one when I'm driving my car, but when I park at the grocery store, on it goes and in I go. And it's strange how what at first seemed like an inconvenience and a little bit of a kind of claustrophobic, stifling thing is now just another piece of clothes. I don't even feel it anymore. And there are other things about this new world, about the quietness of it, the stillness of it, that suits me pretty well. And that's because of my temperament. I'm not taking credit for anything, and this isn't because of merit that I've earned. I just happen to be kind of an introverted guy who leans toward reclusive life. There was a time in my 20s when I was infatuated with the monastic life. I took a class at UC Santa Barbara when I was a religious studies student there in the late 70s, early 80s. And one of the classes I took was called monasticism, and we did field trips to monasteries. And I'm like, this is great. I want to live out in the desert with 18 other dudes and just study and contemplate all day and work and not talk. I'm like, perfect. But of course, it was an infatuation. I wasn't even Catholic, right? So I don't think they would have let me in. It would have been a long process. But anyway, and because I'm a teacher and a writer, I work alone from home all the time anyway. And that makes some aspects of the pandemic stay at home simpler for me than it does for a lot of other folks. So here we are in this 5th month, and it's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to watch the fear. It's difficult to watch the economic ruin, the economic devastation, the unprecedented, well, we haven't seen unemployment numbers like this and economic domestic product numbers like this since the Great Depression. We're way beyond the recession of 2008 now in terms of economic ruin. The old world is being destroyed. It's not like we're ever going to get it back either. We're never going to go back. I've been watching the restaurant industry closely. I have friends in that line of business. And, you know, some of the most conservative estimates are that about 1/3 of all restaurants will never reopen. Some more grim estimates have it at 50%. So there's an entire industry that is being cut off at the knees. And most employees in food service are women, are single women with children. So these are millions of American single parent families thrown onto the welfare rolls. This is, you know, here in my comfortable suburban life where my paycheck has not been interrupted, I have to really make a point of studying those facts about the destruction of the world around me. Now, part of me doesn't want to think about it. I want to just stay in my comfort and I got my own problems and all that. But part of me is like, no, it's kind of my responsibility to take a good, hard look. I've talked many times here because as a musician, of course, I'm got a network of friends in the performing arts. That industry is being, of course, destroyed. Not only the musicians and the actors, but the venues. And nobody knows what's going to happen next. And that's the scary part, I think, apart from the threat of death from the disease and all of the economic ruin. It's the not knowing. It's like, just give me a terminal date. Just tell me when it's going to be over. When can we get back to normal? And nobody can come up with that number because nobody knows. I've heard medical experts this week talk about, you know, even if we get a vaccine, we're going to be social distancing and wearing masks for 2 to 3 years. We could be doing this into 2022. We might never get back to school to the way we used to do it. You know, at my college at Southwestern College, we announced pretty early that we were going 100% online for the fall, and we are going to be almost 100% online for the spring. I don't get to go back to work for over a year. I'm 62 years old. My entire career just went poof. You know, I've been in classrooms with face-to-face students for 30 years. That's gone now. I do it all like this. And I'm adapting. I just got done with a big, long 5-week training program at Southwestern, learning how to be a better online teacher for my college students, because there's a lot of bells and whistles. We don't just do Zoom and I talk like this. There's a lot more going on, as there should be, where things are really engaging for students. They're doing work, they're dialoguing with each other. I mean, there's like 15, 20 different things in a really good online class. It ain't just this. So we don't know when this is going to be over. And because of the devastation of everything that's being wiped out, I still think, and I touched on this in the very early Friday Reflections, I still think there's a lot of grieving that we haven't done yet. I still think there's a lot of honest acknowledgement of the devastating destruction and loss that we have not acknowledged yet, let alone grieved. And I don't know what shape that's going to take either. But I think it's up to our spiritual leaders, our rabbis and our ministers and our priests and our gurus to kind of take the lead on that. Those that administer to the soul have a big job to do right now. And that is to help the community not unravel, to not fall apart. And I start to think about these Friday reflections as a little tiny piece of that. It's certainly one of the islands of sanity in my week, where I get to come here and think through some of these things and just say this stuff out loud, because basically nobody wants to hear it. It's not the kind of thing you talk about at the grocery store as you're checking out. Like, yeah, can you believe this unrecognized grief we're all going through? I mean, you don't talk like that at the grocery store. It's chit chat, it's keep it up, it's hey, thank you, and see you later, and would you like a bag, and that kind of thing. But here we can, again, kind of go a little bit deeper. And then George Floyd happened. And then Breonna Taylor got acknowledged sort of after that, unfortunately, brought into the limelight, and Ahmaud Arbery, and that long list from Trayvon Martin and when BLM started, these last few years, right, there's been a lot of growing intensity around anti-blackness that seems to be baked into the American experience. And we've talked about that before. I'm not going to go down that long trail today with you, but that's another piece of the stressor that's been kind of pressing on us. And what I was struck by is just how much, again, exhaustion there is and pain there is. And I don't know if you've noticed this, how quickly the tears come lately. I watched that old film, How Green Was My Valley. The Roddy McDowall, the great John Ford film about that little tiny mining town in Wales, 1947. Am I getting the year right? Yeah. It won Best Picture. How Green Was My Valley. I DVR'd it on TCM the other day, and I watched it the other day, and it just broke me. It just broke me. I mean, I was crying at the opening titles. I don't know why. I can't explain it, but that movie and other great art, the books we're reading, the documentaries we're watching, the stories we're seeing on social media, our emotions are close to the surface. If you're anything like me, they are very close to the surface. And so it was with great interest that I noticed that Michelle Obama, who I think we can safely say is the most beloved woman on earth besides the Virgin Mary, Michelle Obama, insanely popular person, right? Beloved. Okay, she's got her critics, right? But you know what I'm talking about. She has a podcast now. Her first podcast was with her husband. I forget his name or what he did. But Michelle Obama did a podcast with one of her friends the other day, Michelle Norris. And the two of them talked about kind of what we're thinking about right now, about just like, oh my God, what a summer it's been, and how exhausted we feel, especially as two women of color with that particular slice of the experiential pie of living with white supremacy. And Michelle Obama on the mic of her podcast just acknowledged to, really experience what she called a low-level depression. And I was so heartened to hear that, to see a leader like that, someone who millions of people admire and look up to, someone who on the surface has it all and got it all, won the big cheese, right? Great family, 8 years in the White House, an insanely best-selling book, and this remarkable husband, and a brilliant mind and an Ivy League law degree and her own, the list is long, right? Michelle kind of won at life by, a lot of measures that people study and pay attention to. But here inside, she's like, you know what? I'm really hurting. I'm in a funk and I don't know how to get out of it. I have low level depression all the time, she said. And I thought that was so profoundly important and how and kind of beautiful, really, for her to say that out loud. Because when people who we assume are, on the pantheon, or people we just admire, who seem to have it together, when they show us their cracks, when they admit vulnerably that they don't know what's happening either, and they're not doing very good at navigating the brutal uncertainty of this. What's going to happen in the next 2-3 months when we see waves of evictions, waves of foreclosures? You can do the rent relief and the mortgage relief for a little while, but when does the whole system take an enormous hit? And how much human suffering are we talking about? And if that doesn't haunt you, you're not paying attention. You're doing a good job of hiding from all of that. I'm not suggesting that we need to wallow in worst case scenarios. But on the other hand, it has got to hit you that the pain has just begun, that we're really in the early stages of an enormous social disruption that few of us have seen in our lifetimes this devastating. Now, I can go back in my family story, and you can too, and find similarly gnarly disruptions. I've talked here on other days of Friday Reflections about my mom and dad's experience in the Netherlands, where they lived during World War II, and the Nazi occupation and the starvation and the imprisonment and et cetera, et cetera. So, if you go back in your own family story, you can find times worse than these, for sure. And this isn't, a scorecard. This is about trying to look for tools about how you and I can not only survive this time, but maybe even flourish in the midst of all of this pain and loss. And I think one thing that really helps is what Michelle Obama did. And I know I've done this with my students at Southwestern College. I'm in a room teaching at a community college, and the room is filled with some 18-year-olds, mostly 19 to 24, kind of in that range, and then a few folks in their 30s and 40s, maybe one or two per room, returning folks, and occasionally someone my age even. But mostly quite young people. And I don't know if you remember what it was like being in your 20s, or if you're watching this and you're in your 20s, then you know. It was a tough decade for me. I didn't have a penny, stone cold broke. I didn't know what to do with my life. You're not a teenager anymore, so you have to kind of adult now. You have to learn how to adult. It's a verb now, right? Adulting. And get the bills paid and get some work and put some food on the table and figure out insurance and all that stuff. And then navigate the world of romance and try to partner up if you want to and have that whole crazy thing going on. Being in your 20s is, I think, the most difficult decade of your life. And I look at my students when I used to actually be in rooms with students. And once in a while, I would do, some useful self-disclosure. I'm not one of those teachers that just gets in front of a classroom and tells stories about my life all day long, right? We have work to do, right? Buddhism or whatever is on the table. But once in a while, you can feel the need for some self-disclosure. And I've told my students from time to time in the past about my challenges around depression and anxiety, and the times when I have kind of bottomed out and sought out talk therapy. I've been in therapy probably 4 or 5 times in my life, just for 6-8 week periods, 4-month period sometimes, just to work through some stuff that was not functioning anymore. And to make friends with your own darkness, yeah? And when I tell a little story like that, when I admit in front of a classroom that I've had challenges with depression, you could hear a pin drop. I mean, everybody in the room suddenly looks up. And they can't believe that this guy is saying that. And then I remember, oh yeah, I'm this professor that breezes into the room, and I have a nice car, and I live in a home, and I have these professional degrees, and I stand behind the lectern. And inside, I'm just this scared kid, right? But to them, I'm this leader, this guy who's got it together. All the bridges they have yet to cross: grad school, marriage, a career, home ownership, societally recognized success. They've got none of that. And they see their professors sometimes as, models of what adulting could be. And when they hear a guy like me, like Michelle Obama, and I'm not putting us in the same league, but you know what I mean, in my microcosmic way and her macrocosmic way, to sort of speak the truth about the darkness that I can't understand, that I can't root out, that I can't figure out, that I can't pull myself out of. That sense of pervasive hopelessness. And to acknowledge it, to name it, and to claim it is so liberating. And it's counterintuitive, isn't it? Most of us would probably think otherwise, that no, don't talk about that stuff. Everybody's got that. Don't talk about it. It gives it power, But I'm flipping that on its head and saying, you know what? When you name it and claim it and tell it, it loses its power, because we suddenly have a way of connecting with each other. What's that great Leonard Cohen line, that the cracks are where the light comes in or goes out. And so our imperfections, when recognized in that way, become strengths. And I'm wondering if you're noticing that too, that as you not try to hide your terror, not try to hide your uncertainty, not try to hide your sadness, but when you just let it have its time, like that Rumi poem we read in another Friday Reflections, let all of these visitors come in. Let your anger come in. Let your depression come in. Let them sit at the table and have a cup of tea with you for a while. There's a certain freedom in surrendering to all of these emotional weather systems as we move through them. And I think when students see me do that, I think when we see Michelle Obama do that, we then feel encouraged to look at our own woundedness and to name it and to claim it and to allow it. And in that, a kind of purging begins, a kind of releasing begins. Suddenly it's like you can laugh about it. Suddenly you can say, oh, you know what? When I name it, it's not as big as a monster. It's not as big of a monster as I thought it was. And what a contrast Michelle Obama's leadership was in that moment, to say, and I'm not going to name any names, but let's hypothetically think of a different kind of leader who never shows empathy, who never shows any personal vulnerability, who claims always to be in a state of mastery, of command, who knows more than the generals, who knows more than everybody. That kind of messaging from a leader, it has the opposite effect. It terrifies most of us. We would rather have a leader who said, you know what, I'm a little scared right now. I'm feeling overwhelmed by the suffering that I see in the world around me. So it's an interesting contrast in leadership styles to compare what Michelle Obama did on her podcast to the press briefings that we are privy to day after day after day, the tweet storms of some leaders, and the different vision of heartedness and empathy that we see. And I promise you, I'm not going down a political trail here. I'm using those examples to better learn how to manage my own emotional weather systems. What does real strength look like? What does real power look like? How does it show up? And what does real healing look like, and how does it begin? A lot of us have discovered coping mechanisms, building rituals into our lives to manage the darkness that's all around us, the fear that's all around us. Some of us have thrown ourselves into our work. Got out the sewing machine and got back on that quilt project from 1996 that's been mothballed in your closet. My wife pulled out her sewing machine. You know that sewing machines are impossible to buy right now? They're harder to get than disinfecting wipes. All sewing machines are sold out. It's real. I mean, everybody went into mask making business, I suppose, but we live in home craft era. And the RV market has exploded. You can't buy an RV right now. You can't buy a trailer. You can't rent one. The RV rental business is having its best year. It's renting 3 times more RVs this year than they have in any previous year. This is boom time in some niche industries and endeavors. A lot of us are getting into cooking, and we're upping our kitchen game. So a lot of us are getting outside, and I guess I'll sort of start wrapping up here that one of the things Lori and I do to stay sane is, of course, nature, and to get out of this house and to put on our masks and walk our dog. We have the privilege of living around Lake Murray, and every morning around 6, we head out and walk, and for about an hour, and sometimes we don't say a word. Sometimes we talk the whole time, and we see the osprey nests, and we see the Cooper's hawks and the red-shouldered hawks and the red-tailed hawks fighting with each other. And sometimes you see a pack of coyotes, 3 of them on top of a pile of sticks that's a rabbit warren. And sometimes you see 50 rabbits walking as you walk through a field. This morning there were no rabbits, and my dog was hot on the trail. I think coyotes had just swept through that field and scared all the rabbits. But one of the things I saw today was a flock of Canada geese. There's always Canadian or Canada geese on Lake Murray. And today, they seem incapable of flying without honking. They have to, when they fly, they have to yell about it. Like, I'm flying, I'm flying, I'm flying. So when Canadian geese are flying, they're all honking. It's a powerful sight, isn't it? And they circled this way, and then they came back around, and it was really remarkable. These giant, turkey-sized birds flying through the air, visiting from Canada. I used to call them Canadian geese, and then I was corrected by a bird-watching person who said, no, man, they're called Canada geese. Canada geese, that's like bad grammar. They're from Canada. They're from Canada. They're Canadian. No, the name is Canada geese. So thank you, whoever named Canada geese. Now I have to struggle with that. But I want to leave you with a poem today by Mary Oliver, and it's, of course, Wild Geese. You probably felt it coming, didn't you? I've read it here before, but it just seems so apt for what we're discussing today. There's that one line, tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. So when Michelle Obama sat down with her friend, Michelle Norris, they were talking about each other's despair and how healing that is. But look at how Mary Oliver frames it. Frames that kind of wonderfully human and humane, vulnerable sharing, self-disclosure, appropriately, but self-disclosure in the context then of how that juxtaposes with the healing that comes from immersion in the natural world. Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Mary Oliver's poem, Wild Geese. Google that, print it out, put it on your bathroom mirror, read it to yourself aloud every morning. Let the world announce in harsh and exciting ways your belonging, your place in the family of things. I won't leave you with a platitude today like, we're in this together, or it's all going to be all right. We're not all in this together. Some people have nothing. Other people are comfortable. We're in a storm, but we're all in different boats. And I'm not going to leave you with it's all going to work out or it's all going to be all right, because I don't know where it's going to go. It could get a lot worse. And in the not knowing, in the sacred consciousness of hopelessness, we surrender and we turn it over to whatever we conceive of as our higher power. And on our knees, in that surrender, we find not answers, but a way to be with the questions and still stay afloat and still find our own artfulness and, dare I say it, joy, even while so much is dissolving around us. That's, to me, the bridge from here to wherever it is we are going. And I share that walk with you. I always think of Ram Dass's line in moments like this, that we're all just walking each other home. And I love that you and I are walking together. See you on the other side.